More. Thank you. Wonderful. Okay, good evening and welcome to another episode of the Wild Sheep webinar series. I'm Amanda Verhill, the Executive Director of the National Bighorn Sheep Center. Our mission is to provide education and outreach for the national conservation of wild sheep, wildlands, and wildlife. Tonight in our Wild Sheep webinar series, we present the Summer Internship program with Jenny Bautz. In partnership with the University of Wyoming, the National Bighorn Sheep Center hosts an internship program stationed here at the National Bighorn Sheep Center in DuBois, Wyoming. Eligible candidates have completed their sophomore, junior, or senior year of undergraduate education within the UW Wildlife curriculum. The center selects individuals who have excelled in their studies, have a passion for wildlands and wildlife, and aspire to build a career in informing and educating the public about the science and needs of our wildlands and wildlife. The intern's responsible for implementing educational programs and outreach events at the center and offsite expos as well. The intern supports the museum and the gift shop around admissions, sales, and tours. And they also complete 50% of their time really as offsite work, assisting and shadowing staff and other wildlife research management personnel from various different professional conservation organizations. Jenny has done an outstanding job as summer intern here at the center this year. We interviewed exceptional candidates for this program, and we're really grateful for her service and her contributions to the center. We'll miss her expertise, energy, and enthusiasm, and she has taken our program to the next level. So take it away, Jenny.
Well, thank you, Amanda, for that very kind and wonderful introduction. And yeah, I am Jenny Bautz, and I'm going to tell you all about the details of my summer here at the National Bighorn Sheep Center in DuBois. A little background about me. I'm Jenny, and I was born and raised in Lander, Wyoming, just an hour and some to the east and down. I am currently a senior at the University of Wyoming. My majors are environment, natural resources, and outdoor recreation and tourism management. My hobbies include fishing, hiking, exploring, finding rocks, thanks to my geologist mother sitting next to Caroline, and spending time with dogs, friends, and family. I'm here because I have a passion for the conservation of Wyoming lands and wildlife. This internship has provided me with many opportunities for learning and personal growth, including center and outreach operations, field shadowing, and professional development. Here at the center, a majority of my work centered around visitor interactions. The people coming in are coming from all over the place, lots of Texas and Florida and California, and they know almost nothing about bighorn sheep because they've never seen them and never been around them. We're here to educate and answer any questions these people might have about bighorn sheep, explaining the way our state and federal agencies interact with these animals and how we are helping to keep them on our landscape. Another big part of the center has been doing tours, specifically with school groups, and I have toured elementary through high school students through the center, trying to give them a comprehensive understanding of how conservation works in Wyoming and hopefully inspiring the future generation of conservationists. We also do some wonderful events here at the center. A standout event from this summer was the 31st birthday party, where we had raffles and food and a great time. Everybody came out, even with the windy, rainy day. And I got to be the root beer float scooper, which was pretty fun. My first official Sheep Center event was the Lander, Wyoming Outdoor Weekend, where I got to meet Amanda and Anna Miller, and we set up a lovely educational booth indoors at the Lander Community Center for community members to browse, while the three of us went outside and set up a station for the youth of the Lander, DuBois, and other nearby communities to come learn about sheep testing for the bacteria Mycoplasma ovipneumoniae. If you haven't toured the center yet, you might not know that this disease is responsible for leaving sheep susceptible to the spread of pneumonia, which is deadly, especially for young lambs and weak ewes and rams in the wintertime. This is an essential component of bighorn sheep education for the youth, and we did so by letting them practice swabbing on our real life rams in the corner. And we had them swab that onto little petri dishes. If it turned blue, it was positive. If it turned yellow, it was negative. And we explained from there what you do when a sheep tests negative and what you do when a sheep tests positive. We also got to explain the benefits of collaring sheep and keeping track of them, and how knowing where they are in the landscape makes our research so much easier. Overall, a very fruitful weekend. My next main event at the center was the Spring Fling. This was the beginning of June, where myself and another young woman got to dress up as 1850s pioneer women. That was our assigned decade, and we had a blast with that. We also got to set up a mini golf course all around the mountain, so people got to get the full experience of touring our museum while playing a game of mini golf. You can see down in the corner, we had the ball going directly into a sheep horn underneath a sheep skull. It was all very on theme, and everybody had a blast. One of my favorite center-based events was Camp Bighorn. This event lasted a whole week, where we took exactly 30 youth out into the Torrey Valley at the Whiskey Mountain Conservation Camp, and we spent the whole week teaching them all sorts of things related to the outdoors and bighorn sheep. Here you can see the students on a hike. We hiked to the falls back towards the Lake Louise Trail. We also had local expert Tom Lucas educating on the past of weaponry, the history. We also had Al teach about modern weaponry, which was a treat. Sorry I didn't get a picture of you up here, but that was a great lesson. We also learned some stream ecology with Aaron Hanley from the DuBois-Crowheart Conservation District. And as you can see in that corner, the kids are learning about edible and medicinal plants from town local Meredith Taylor. One of the biggest treats of the whole week was the 4th of July parade with these kids. We were lucky enough that Camp Bighorn overlapped with the 4th of July, and we got to parade them down the main street, wearing their bighorn horns and waving some flags. And that was a blast as well. Another very fun component of this internship has been leading Torrey Valley tours with Brian Sage. Brian Sage is a wealth of knowledge about the Torrey Valley and the history of the DuBois area, and I learned so much from him on our drives out into the valley. We took many of the school groups that I toured here in the museum out to see what they were learning about in here in person. While the sheep are not in the Torrey Valley throughout the summer, the petroglyphs and the sheep's habitat and vegetation that they feed on is in the valley all summer. And we were able to educate these kids up close and personal about the history of the Native Americans on this landscape and the current history and status of the vegetation available to these sheep. Another event that I got to do, so many events with the lovely Anna Miller, we went to the Wyoming Wild Sheep Foundation banquet in Cheyenne, where there were about 2 components of this trip. The first component was the before banquet, where we set up this huge line of bighorn sheep artifacts and pieces and education materials. And I think we answered about as many questions for parents as we did for kids. Everybody loved it and had a blast. Not pictured was our leather stamping station, provided courtesy of Steve. Thank you so much. The kids loved it. We stamped a lot of leather that day. The second portion of that evening was actually attending the banquet, where Anna and I were lucky enough to go on stage and present some raffle prizes. And we also both got a moment, to touch on the mission of the center and to advertise Camp Bighorn. And then moving away from events, I also got to go out and about a lot this summer and get a lot of hands-on experience doing research and working with wildlife professionals in the field. Starting off, one of the first in the field experiences I had was a vegetation survey in Death Canyon for the Teton sheep herd. I was sent out with 2 of Sarah Dewey with the National Park Service's technicians, and we measured a 100-meter length of vegetation ground that is hopefully going to sustain a population of bighorn sheep. We then divided that up into 20-meter segments and took 1 square meter in each of those 20-meter segments and documented every species of wildflower, grass, or any other type of plant, and then marked the percentages that vegetation took up in those transects. This should give us a rough estimate of what food is available for bighorn sheep and whether or not that land is going to be able to sustain populations in the future. One of my favorite events that I got to do multiple times this summer was gill netting. I did gill netting with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, with Tribal Game and Fish, and with the Lander Game and Fish, all of which were amazing experiences. I learned a lot from wildlife biologist Mike Major, pictured above, teaching a large group of people about the reason we gill net and how we gill net. And those reasons are to get relative fish population samples. So essentially comparing how many rainbow trout are in this lake versus last year. Are there any rainbow trout in this lake since last year? And a big focus of this year's gill netting was keeping track of the lake trout. If you see the gentleman holding the ginormous, impressive fish, while an angler's dream is actually not an ideal fish to find in your local lake, because those lake trout are very much generalists and they can eat just about anything, and they will outcompete our sensitive little rainbow trouts and brook trouts. And you don't want that when you're from Wyoming and love to catch brook trouts. So we're keeping track of that lake trout expansion very closely and trying to make sure that it doesn't wipe out our other little trout, because we love them. It was also a great experience for educating youth. These are a bunch of kids from Crowheart talking to a grad student from the University of Wyoming who showed up to assist us on one of our gill netting days. And he added a crawdad component, and we got to pass the crawdad around, and the kids were just fascinated. And they got their fingers pinched a couple times, which was kind of funny. Another experience I was lucky to have with wildlife biologist Pat Nelica from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife in Lander was bat detector retrieval. So another relative population sample comparing how many bats we have this year versus last year and 5 years ago and in what areas. And we did this by putting up specialized microphones that pick up on those bat noises that people just can't hear at all. And Pat and I got to take an ATV for the day, go up into some beautiful country on the reservation, and remove those bat detectors and then bring them back to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife office to collect that data and run it through the software that sorts the different sounds. It's really cool. Pat explained to me how they have started using AI to separate those bat voices instead of having to unlayer all of the sounds through the microphone. And it sounds like his job is about to be a lot more efficient with the use of AI. We were also lucky enough to run into this herd of elk out there, and our bat recorder was right up the hill behind him. So we kind of sat here and waited for him to get out of the way, which was not a bad spot to have lunch. All right. Oh no, we'll see. Okay. Wild horse management. Something I did not know very much about at all before I started this internship and got to work with Mr. Art Lawson out of the Tribal Fish and Game was anything about wild horse management. And then I met Art Lawson of Tribal Fish and Game, and he explained to me all about what they're doing and why. So wild horses feed on the landscape much differently than any sort of wildlife does. Our antelope, our elk, and our sheep will bite off the tops of grasses when they're feeding, and that grass has a chance to regrow in years to come and will stay on the landscape. When wild horses are feeding, they'll rip that grass out from the roots, and cheatgrass will grow in its place. Cheatgrass does not feed anything, horses or wildlife, and anywhere the horses go, eventually nothing can eat because it will turn to dust and cheatgrass, which is not ideal when you're trying to conserve wildlife. So what Art and his team are doing on the reservation is reducing the number of wild horses from the 30,000s to the 10s to 100s. It's not ideal to completely wipe wild horses off the landscape, as they do represent a significant cultural statue. They've been integrated into both Wyoming and Native American culture combined for hundreds and hundreds of years. But it's essential that they are not overrunning these lands and are instead an asset and not a liability. By keeping them in the 10s to 100s, the people that live on the reservation can still have access to horses when they want them and do their tourism where they show guests the wild horses on the landscape, but the landscape will not be destroyed for our wildlife. Another adventure I went on this summer was conservation easements with Sarah Domick. Conservation easements are essentially when some of the rights to land are sold to conservation agencies to protect that land from being subdivided and turned into residential areas, all fenced up and essentially destroyed for wildlife use. This is especially useful in migration corridors and maintaining our wide open spaces that we love so greatly here in Wyoming. Sarah Domick took me out up Horse Creek and showed me some of the easements they have up there through the Nature Conservancy, and we measured fences. So some fences are friendly for wildlife and some are not. Sometimes there are barbs on top of fences and sometimes there are not. Obviously, the wildlife like the fences with no barbs. They also like big gaps on the bottom of their fences instead of small gaps so that they can squeeze under and their young have a way to travel when they're switching from summer and winter range and vice versa. There was a large range of wildlife-friendly acceptable fencing and not at the Horse Creek easements, which was a really interesting thing to see and lots of measurements. Another great day that I had out in the field was my day with the bear management crew in the Teton National Park. We focused on the Coulter Bay campsite this day because there was so much trash on the ground that we didn't really have time to get anywhere else. But as you can see, the tourists coming into the national parks do not always know how to store their food correctly and how to keep it away from bears. So we spent a lot of time writing citations and actually removing coolers full of drinks and candy and food from these campsites. And there was a lot of hauling, a lot of driving back and forth, but it was really encouraging to see the way that the bear specialist crew was interacting with these people from these campsites. And rather than scolding, they explained the risks associated with leaving this food out, how it hurts the bears, and the danger it puts everybody in the national parks, humans and wildlife alike. And it really seemed that everybody at these campsites took something away from their conversations, and I don't think they'll do it again in the future. Another great day out in the field again, they were all great days, was Beaver Dam analog maintenance. This project was incredible. I learned so much about something I've never really heard of before. Essentially, what we were doing out here was reshaping the landscape to be ready for the reintroduction of beavers. Beavers are a keystone species on our landscape. They change every water place that they decide to live. Of course, they dam it up and it fills up. Without beavers, the creeks are not functioning as they should be traditionally. And what happened to Mill Creek in South Pass was years and years of fire suppression, allowing for the encroachment of conifers towards the creek banks. And this outcompeted the willows and the aspens that the beavers depend on, and the beavers disappeared. This project, through the Game and Fish, is to get beavers back here. So what they did before we got here was clear about 40 feet from the banks of the creek of conifers. They have stuck some willows into the creek. Apparently they're hardy enough species that they'll just grow like that. Who knew? But we stuck some willows in the edges of the creeks, and then we built some fake beaver dams. And essentially, we are just getting this stretch of creek ready for the beavers to come home to. And the timeline of this is far out, but it's exciting to see it starting. And I'm excited, hopefully, to see beavers back in Mill Creek now. Another really cool day I got to be a part of was a pine cone survey with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife. For this pine cone survey, we essentially just walked out with a pair of binoculars and neck pillows, laid in the ground, and counted pine cones all day. It's as easy as it sounds. Lots of adjusting our necks that day, but it is very important information. The bark beetle kill in our forests and the winds is always a problem, always persisting, and keeping track of that and how it's going to affect our wildlife is an important part of conservation. These white bark pine trees are an essential source of food and nutrients for the grizzly population as they eat the pine nuts inside of these pine cones. Making sure that these pine cones are still being produced is really important for those people keeping a close eye on the bears. And that is where we sent our information at the end of the day, was to a bear research lab up in, not sure, I'll have to check with Pat about where they were from, but I know we were helping some bear people. And that was a wonderful day. Also, the view was okay. All right, with the Wind River Buffalo Restoration Initiative, I had a blast following around Albert Mason, a PhD student. He is working on putting buffalo back on the Wind River Indian Reservation and hopefully eventually a self sustaining, unmanaged wild population. He does not want these buffalo to be ranched, he does not want them to be pets. These are going to be free roaming, healthy buffalo, which I think is just amazing. Here you can see the one baby that hangs around. This one is the one exception, and he gets to be like a pet. But other than that, all of the bison were very independent. And what we did this day was follow them around in an ATV and wait for them to drop their bison cakes, which are very important for Albert's research. What we did was collect 20 samples from fresh bison pies, and we send those off for testing for nutrient analysis. And then those nutrient ratios and just essentially whatever they've been eating is compared to bison pies of the past and the vegetation available on the landscape hundreds and hundreds of years ago before it was so altered by current agriculture. And this will tell us whether or not our current landscape will be able to sustain bison populations the way it once did, and if so, how many and in what places, which is going to be important information going forward in restoring buffalo populations. Finally, one of the most amazing experiences of my entire life was the Bighorn ewe and lamb behavior field research I did with master student Jack Gavin out of the Monteith shop from Laramie, Wyoming. We hiked into the Gros Ventre, and I used Carolyn Gillette's backpack. You can't tell, but it's on there. And we had the most amazing time studying lambs and ewes in a field. Essentially, my days comprised of waking up with the sun, stepping out into the trees, and then going and sitting right where they are and watching sheep through a scope for about 8 hours all day. And it was the most fun you could ever have. We wrote down all sorts of lamb and ewe behaviors, and the focus of this study was to determine whether or not sheep infected with Mycoplasma ovopneumonia bacteria interact with their lambs any differently. So we observed the time they spent nursing, the time they spent being alert, and the time they spent feeding. And that will be compared between lambs and ewes that are sick and lambs and ewes that are not sick to try to combat this tough issue of Mycoplasma ovopneumonia and the spread of pneumonia. So this is really important research that is very applicable to everything we present here at the Sheep Center. We also got this awesome video of these little lambs. So the craziest thing I've never seen little lambs do this. But these guys were all with their mothers about 10 seconds. All at the same time decided to bolt to the lifts and jump around and play King of the Hill. So not pictured is the top lamb sort of pushing off the other lambs that tried to get above him on this hill. And it was just one of the most fun things to watch. You can hear us talking about it in the background there. But that was just a blessing to spend my days out there. And all of that time was incredible. And I learned so much about both data collection and backpacking in the Gros Ventre. All right. So overall, this summer I learned new planning and implementation skills through my events and organizing things at the center. I got a lot of practice with data collection and research, very hands-on, and I overall have a better understanding of conservation processes and policy. I would like to thank everybody here for coming and listening to me talk about my amazing summer, and especially all of you that I have gotten to know this summer. I could not have done any of this without your support, and I'm so grateful to have met every single one of you. Any questions?
Yep. Now we open it up to Q&A normally for our Wild Sheep webinar, so please feel free to ask questions. And those of you that are on Zoom, feel free to chat and unmute at this point.
All right, let's go with Carolyn.
So did you see bat populations declining or increasing, or what?
See, I asked Pat to get back to me about that, and he's going to have to finish processing his data. But I've got his number now. We moved past email. So
Sense of are the populations?
he said that they have been stable in the areas that they've been monitoring, and he is not concerned. He actually heard noises from some bats that they were concerned about being completely gone from certain areas as bats are returning. So this is a good thing because they're not in competition with the other bats. Yes.
So when you went to the grow barn, is that herd infected with pneumonia or not?
Yes.
Those herds, I guess.
Yeah, they at least have the Mycoplasma pneumoniae bacteria in their bodies. Whether or not they actually have pneumonia is not known right now. That would be something testing would show at their next captures, which usually happen at the beginning of summer. But essentially, he had collared groups that we know are infected, and then there are collared groups elsewhere that we know are not infected, and we'll compare their behaviors to each other. Yes.
Yes, I'd like to, first of all, recognize and secondly, thank Steve Kilpatrick for having the vision and the foresight to establish this program. It benefits the Sheep Center, but it also helps develop our young conservationists of the future. So hats off to you, Steve.
Yes.
Absolutely.
No, this is designed the most incredible learning experience I've ever seen.
What could we do to make it better?
Oh man. Not much. This was everything I hoped it would be and more. I think really pushing future interns to just keep going after those field contacts and making sure that they're scheduling multiple experiences with the same biologists to get to that deeper level, because the first day you meet and spend with someone out in the field, you're going to go through all the basics. But I went out with Pat Nilica at least 6 or 7 times this summer, and by the end of it, I knew his entire process going through school, how he made his personal decisions, how he wanted to live his life, and how he chose where he ended up. And I think my conversations with Pat from Lander will always stick with me, and they're really helping me think about where I want to take my career.
Did you have a chance to get involved with the Painted Hills landowners about the goat and sheep interaction with the wild sheep? Were you involved with that?
I did not attend anything specifically centered
Okay.
around that, but I did catch drifts of it from community members and just
Okay.
talking with the people I work with here who are very knowledgeable about that
Sure.
stuff.
One thing I want to mention too is Jenny went on an eco flight with
Yes.
Friends of the Du Bois Badlands, and just kind of got to see a overview of the
Yeah.
different areas.
And that was cool because I got to see the land that they were talking about designating specific ways while that was in discussion. And then recently I saw, emails from the Wyoming Wilderness Association with updates about that. So it was really cool to know exactly what that land looks like from up above and where it is in relation to everything else. That was a good one. I should have put some of those plane pictures up here too.
Yeah.
Hard to fit it all in.
Yes.
I have to compliment Jenny for being here, because she also had the opportunity, to believe right now, to be in the Tetons on a sheep survey.
That is true. I was invited to another one.
Sitting on top
And
of the mountain looking
I know,
at
I
sheep,
should have.
she's looking at that.
Yeah, but I've never heard a better what I did on my summer vacation.
And I've never had a better one to tell, honestly.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So if you could tell every youth in Wyoming, it's a two-part question, every youth in Wyoming, one thing, either about what this place does or the importance of conservation in general, or specific, it's your choice, one thing in that sort of category, what would it be? And if you could tell every youth outside of Wyoming in the United States a piece of information about what is being done here in conservation that you observe, what would it be? Maybe it's the same.
Yeah, no, that is a great question. I think I would just tell them, this is your home and this is all we have, really. You can build and you can drill and you can mine, but yeah, the sheep, and they're just figures of this landscape, and they've been here for so many years. You have to respect what Mother Nature has created and do your best not to destroy it and keep it around for the generations to come that will enjoy it as much as you do. I don't know, did I get both parts?
I think you did.
But it's clean camping too.
Yeah, that picture.
The pictures
I don't know
are
if
Yeah.
you remember or not, but that Coulter Bay campground is where we camped as a family. And the story was you were very young, 6 maybe.
You remember the bear scratched our tent?
Yeah, we had, we could hear the bears outside the tents and half tent, half cabin, well, that was not helpful, and it was pretty scary and, nothing happened, I stayed fine. And, we left right away as soon as we could in the morning. But the night before, the fellow campers, there was a bicycle race going on and they had stopped at Coulter Bay campground and the whole team, support team of this bicycle race was cooking over an open fire, half of a cow on a bed spring frame, to like be a spit light. I'm not kidding. And Jenny's dad and his
I don't
sons were
remember
like,
that.
we had reservations to camp and we're like, oh my gosh.
Oh gosh, I don't remember that
You were
part.
a little bitty, you were like 40-pound little kid, and your sister was like 30 pounds, and we're just like really vigilant, didn't get any sleep that night.
Oh, man.
And nobody got hurt, but I mean, there were 2 bears that had gone through, 2 adult bears that were scoping out, no doubt eating and licking the rest of the meat, and it was like, oh.
Well, obviously in that picture in the corner that I showed, foxes had gotten in. Luckily not
That's what
bears,
that
but
was,
still
yeah.
not good at all,
It's sort of an indelible kind of picture though, which anyway, it's quite sobering to I did not know it was the same campground until you named it.
Same campground. And 2 weeks before I did my visit out there, there had been a grizzly bear in that Coulter Bay campground number 6. So be careful going to Coulter Bay, guys. But
Anna, any questions or comments on the Facebook Live page? Or from you personally?
No comments, but I have a question. With all your shadowings, what do you want to do now?
oh man, isn't that the
so much
question?
good experience. Which one stuck out the most that you're I would pursue that in a heartbeat?
I have to say the fish and the field observations of the sheep. So I'm torn between fish and large ungulates. I mean, they couldn't be more different, really, but they're just my favorite things. I love fishing, and I can't tell if the gill netting was really just my passion for pulling heavy fish out of the water showing through, or if I actually want to gill net forever. But seeing those sheep out there was a pretty irreplaceable experience, and I feel that way about all of our large mammals and small mammals. I think the small mammals get looked over, which I might look over them a little bit too. But I would love to go to grad school and further my education and do more for conservation and just make sure that I'm in a position with that master's degree to do more for conservation, because I know without it, you can't get as far into the field as you might want to make an impact. So I know I want to go there. I do still have love for my outdoor recreation and tourism management major. I am also just a huge supporter of getting people out and enjoying public lands the way that everyone in Wyoming has had the privilege of having right in their backyards. I think access to those experiences is essential for all people all over our country, and I want to make sure that people know how to do that safely. And leave no trace is another big passion of mine. So I am torn between that social side and education side and public outreach side and the getting in the dirt and studying side. But I'm thinking my conversations with my advisor and with all of you and just looking into what grad school programs are going to work best for me in the coming years are going to really help me make that decision. Thanks, Anna. Sorry, that was a long answer.
That's a great answer.
Okay, any other questions or comments, thoughts? Well, on behalf of the National Bighorn Sheep Center, I want to thank Steve Kilpatrick so much for getting this program started. It's just a pleasure to work for this organization. Also, all the board members who are on the committee to be able to interview and hire such great quality people, such as Jenny and Jenny, you for your commitment and passion for this. And just thank you so much. Really, really appreciate you. And all of you out there who help out with this. This is a good thing. We're doing good things and just really grateful for that. So
amazing.
And the staff as well. The staff has been absolutely amazing. I think the
Uh-huh.
team we have right now is,
Oh, yeah.
is just really wonderful. So
This thank
and-
you goes out to both of the Annas, even the Anna that you can't see right now. She's in there.
And all of the staff and board members who have worked at this place over the years and who have made this happen and got us here to this point. We're just really indebted and grateful to all of you. So thank you so much. And any other comments or questions, please send them our way. Email us, check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and all the other places. So thank you very much and have a good evening.
Thank you.